Welcome back to the Cobb County Republican Women's Club Candidates Forum. Our next candidates are for U.S. Representative for the 11th District, filling the seat of Congressman Phil Gingrey, who is running for U.S. Senate. We have an additional panelist joining us to ask questions. I would like to introduce Chip Lake. Chip is the founding partner in the political consulting firm Glendale Strategies Incorporated. In that capacity, Mr. Lake has consulted for 4 members of the Georgia Republican delegation and has spent 6 years in Washington as Chief of Staff to Congressman Lynn Westmoreland. Chip lives in Marietta with his wife, April, and sons, Austin and Carson. Our format again will be each candidate will have 1 minute for an opening statement. They will field questions and will be given 1 minute to respond. Each candidate will also be given 2 minutes for a closing statement. There are 2 timekeepers, one directly in front of you candidates and one to my left. You will be given a 30-second warning card and a bell will ring to end. Due to time constraints, please refrain from applause until the end of the segment of the forum. Our candidates for the U.S. Representatives for the 11th District are former Congressman Bob Barr, Alan Levine, Representative Ed Lindsay, former State Senator Barry Loudermilk, Colonel Larry Rosinski, and Tricia Pridemore. Congressman Bob Barr, we will begin with your 1 minute opening statement.
Thank you. My name is Bob Barr, and I'm a candidate to represent the 11th District of Georgia in the U.S. House of Representatives. During the time that I had the honor of representing Cobb County and the rest of the 7th District in the House of Representatives, we had to deal with a president named Bill Clinton. Yet through leadership and hard work, we brought Bill Clinton to his knees. We forced him to sign a balanced budget, we forced him to cut taxes, and we forced him to reform welfare, among other things. We now have in President Barack Obama a Bill Clinton on steroids. He is moving this country toward a fiscal abyss. He has completely obliterated the strength of our diplomatic, military, and national security effort overseas. We need somebody in the 11th District that knows how to get the job done, that has been there, that has a proven track record of moving our conservative agenda forward. I'm the only candidate in this race that can make that claim with a straight face and honestly, and that is what the 11th District needs. Thank you.
Mr. Levine?
Yeah, I'm Alan Levine. I'm running for the 11th District House of Representatives. I'm a naturalized American citizen. I moved to this country in 1970, became naturalized in 75. I could not believe that the opportunity and the optimism of the American people back then. I did so well that I retired when I was 26. After 2 years, I got tired of being retired. I became a certified financial planner, specializing in municipal finance. I moved to Cobb County in 1982, had a wonderful time, have enjoyed myself, been in business for over 30 years here. I see this country since the year 2000 starting to fail, and I deal in practical solutions. So I want to represent the people of Cobb County, the 11th District, to solve problems and not talk about them. Thank you.
Mr. Lindsay?
Good evening, and thank y'all for allowing us to come here today and be part of your home, for those of you who are watching on the television. My name is Ed Lindsay. As a Republican state legislator and a leader in the Georgia House, I have developed a well-earned reputation as a conservative who can get the job done. In that capacity, I've taken on the tough challenges. I've looked at things from the inside and the out. I've been the person to go into the room and negotiate those hard things. More importantly, however, I'm also a husband and a father. I have 3 wonderful sons who are in college now. Because of my concern over their future, I believe in a dynamic conservatism that is going to be able to protect their future, enable our nation to maintain its status as that shining city on a hill, and perhaps most importantly, take on head-on the challenges facing our country today. Thank you very much.
Senator Loudermilk?
Good evening. I'm Barry Loudermilk, and 33 years ago, while attending church, I met a beautiful young lady by the name of Desiree. And shortly after we were married, I felt the call to serve our nation, and so I joined the United States Air Force. And after 8 years of military service, we returned back to my home state of Georgia, where I started a small business which I've been running for the past 20 years. Today we have 3 grown children, and we're very excited that our oldest son and daughter-in-law are about to give us our first grandchild, which is due around the time of the election. However, that child, when she's born, is going to come into a nation that is facing significant challenges. Challenges that are brought on by big government. An overwhelming debt that threatens our national security and continual threats on our rights and liberties that we knew growing up. But I know we can restore America because I believe in American exceptionalism. Why am I running for Congress? Well, that's pretty simple. Because my children and grandchildren deserve better.
Colonel Rosinski.
My name is Colonel Larry Rosinski, retired U.S. Army. I've served you for nearly 3 decades on active duty. I've served in the U.S. State Department under Condoleezza Rice. I know how foreign policy is made, and I've helped implement it. Ladies and gentlemen, my family, I'm very proud of. My wife of 28 years and my 4 children. 2 who graduate here in Cobb County from Life University and 1 in Kennesaw University. And my daughter, who gave us our first grandchild on Reagan's birthday, February 6th. And she works in the corporate, very proud of her. Ladies and gentlemen, every 2 to 4 to 6 years you've been disappointed. Now is your time to change career politicians and to get the government back to you. I pledge to you that all the talents and all the experience that I have, I will do that for you.
Ms. Pridemore.
My name is Tricia Pridemore, and nearly 2 decades ago, my husband Mike and I sat on the driveway of our Cobb County home, dreamed up a product, started a business, and achieved the American dream. I'm running for Congress because I believe that there is no other country in the world where that is possible. I'm running for Congress to fight against big government, high taxes, and a bureaucratic system that is in some ways out of control. But most importantly, I'm running for Congress to fight for individual liberty, to fight for free markets, and to fight for you.
Thank you. We will now begin the questioning. You will have 1 minute for your response. You will be notified of a 30-second time limit, and then the bell will ring. The first question is from J.D. Van Brink, President of the Georgia Tea Party.
If you could design the perfect national tax system, what would it look like?
Mr. Levine?
I'm in favor. There are 2 current tax systems that have been proposed for years, the fair tax and the flat tax. The flat tax being basically a simple tax and a fair tax being a national sales tax. I actually believe that we can resolve our problems by dramatically increasing our GDP by eliminating the federal corporate taxes. The federal government has a vested interest in keeping the income tax system the way it is so they can control the public through a myriad of methods. But if we eliminate the federal corporate taxes, we will introduce trillions of foreign dollars, trillions, not billions, into this system. And these foreign corporations will build new factories and facilities providing full employment for American workers.
Representative Lindsay?
JD, you know there's no such thing as a perfect tax system. All of us know that. All we can do is work as hard as we can to come up with something that's fair and, quite frankly, can fund the federal government in a limited way without giving it too much money to overreach into our private lives. That's why I favor the fair tax as a long-term solution. It is, however, only a long-term solution because there are a lot of things that need to be done before we can even implement that. We first have to be able to basically take away the President's 16th Amendment and repeal it before we can even go to the fair tax. So we need to do things incrementally. We first need to flatten the taxes and lower them overall so that we can spur the economy, particularly in the area of corporate taxes. We then need to slowly start working our way toward a fair tax by lowering the overall size and scope of the federal government so that we can get into a position where we can finally pass a constitutional amendment and get the fair tax in place.
Senator Loudermilk?
Well, that's an excellent question, especially if you ask if we could design the perfect tax system. First, it would be a system that does not give the federal government direct access to the American citizens. It also does not tax prosperity, and it gives the citizens full control of how much tax dollars that they spend. What we've defined there is basically a national consumption tax, to where the states actually collect the tax dollars based on the sales tax, and then they pass it on to the federal government. But any tax system that we move to, because the one we have now does not work, we have to get rid of the IRS, we need to repeal the 16th Amendment, and the tax system that has been designed to do that would be the simple tax, which actually moves us to a flat tax until we actually repeal the 16th Amendment and go to a national consumption tax. That would be my choice.
Colonel Mrozinski.
JD, excellent question. Ladies and gentlemen, the fair tax, it's a package. It includes the dissolving of the 16th Amendment. That's the fair way to attack this, not to go after and hope that we can do it. Ladies and gentlemen, in the House and in the Senate, the fair tax has 73 supporters currently and 8 in the Senate. The flat tax only has 10 in the House. And the flat tax only taxes consumption, but what it also does, it taxes everything along the assembly line. Fair tax does not tax used items. Ladies and gentlemen, until something better comes along, Congressman Mrozinski supports the fair tax, and my colleagues that will meet in Congress.
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you, JD. Our current tax code is 74,000 pages long, and it's 185 times bigger than it was when the 16th Amendment was adopted back in 1913. When you consider the amount of work that goes into a family just to prepare their family's taxes every year, it's just a system that we simply cannot continue. Of the 3 major proposals that are out, the fair tax, the flat tax, and the simple tax, any of them would be better than what we have today. But I tend to lean towards a simple tax. It does include a prebate, and I believe that fundamentally we can roll back our tax code.
Congressman Bob Barr.
We made a very small but important start toward a fair tax system when we passed the Balanced Budget and Tax Reduction Act of 1997. Unfortunately, even though that brought us to a balanced budget for about 3 or 3.5 years, the cost of government and government spending shot through the roof again. The only way to ensure that we have a fair tax system, a better tax system, one that keeps government spending in check, is to do away with the 16th Amendment, do away with corporate taxes, and institute what has become known as a simple tax, which is a consumption tax at a much lower rate than the fair tax proposals, because it is much simpler. It separates out FICA, so you have a much more direct way through a consumption tax, and you have a timeline that moves us rationally in that direction.
And the second question will be from Roseanne Hall, past president of CCRWC.
What do you believe is the most important issue that affects the voters in District 11, and how do you propose to address it?
I'm sorry, Representative Ed Lindsay.
Thank you very much. Excellent question. The number one issue I believe that exists on the federal level is the size of our debt. At the present moment, it's approaching $18 trillion. And we don't seem to have a Congress willing to take on those tough jobs of bringing it into line, balancing the budget. That's why I strongly believe that we need to move toward a balanced budget amendment. And I've already started that this year in the Georgia House. I was a co-sponsor of a bill that calls for a convention of the states to have the states themselves move forward with a proposed federal constitutional amendment. We waited on Congress long enough. In 1982 was the first time Congress even voted on a proposed balanced budget amendment. At that time, it was only $1 trillion, the size of the debt. Today, it's over almost $18 trillion. So I believe that we need to be focused on trying to balance the budget. We need to fight for a balanced budget amendment. That way, we can start bringing the federal government under control and keeping it out of our lives.
Senator Loudermilk.
The national debt is by far the most dangerous thing that this nation is facing nationwide. By the end of this fiscal year, it's going to be $18 trillion. To give you an idea of how big $18 trillion is, if you go back to the beginning of our current calendar, which would be the birth of Christ, and you put away $16,000 every 60 seconds, you still wouldn't have enough money to pay off the debt today. Just the interest payment that we made on the debt alone last year would have bought 151 2,700 F-35 fighter planes, which cost $151 million apiece. We have to reduce the debt. The only way to do that is to force Congress to do it. Congress is not going to balance the budget. They've proven over the years of all the constitutional amendments they've ever passed, all of them have restricted state powers, not their own. Congress must introduce a balanced budget amendment, which will be the first act that I work on to force Congress to live within its means.
Colonel Wozinski.
Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing that affects us is our energy. As a congressman, you go to Washington to affect policy implementation or changes or get the burden off the backs of the people. We haven't discussed an energy plan since 2008. I say we have an energy plan. I think one of my first acts to Congress is to call for an energy policy in this nation. Balancing the budget? Absolutely. I called for that on my inaugural address, as it were, in August 17th. And I said that this has to take place first. And also, ladies and gentlemen, the Affordable Care Act, less regulation also equals less and more jobs. Less jobs if we keep it, more jobs if we get rid of it.
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you for the question, Roseanne. As I've been campaigning for nearly the last year, the number one thing that people want to talk to me about is job creation. People want to work, and job creators want to be able to create more jobs, especially those that are in small businesses. Job creation is debt reduction. When you look at the $17 trillion debt that our nation faces, what better way to reduce that besides cutting some spending programs, but fundamentally putting people back to work. I also strongly believe that when you consider that the benefits to the individual of job creation, what people want more than anything else is to be able to have a paycheck, to be able to bring home for their family and produce for them. It's the fundamental basis of our American dream.
Congressman Barr.
The most important issue as I travel across the 11th district is to reduce the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government. People in the 11th district want their lives, their businesses, their local government back in charge of their lives. They want to get the federal government out of their pocketbook. They want to get the federal government out of their businesses. They want to be able to build roads where the citizens of that district wish those roads to go. They want to be able to hire people that they need to run their businesses and not have the federal government tell them what to do. They want to be able to keep more of their money so they can spend it on their families and those things that are important to them. They want reduced taxes in all of its manifestations. What a U.S. Congressman from the 11th District needs to do today and every year until we get this monstrosity back under control is to reduce the size, the scope, the cost, and the power of the federal government.
Mr. Levine.
We have two problems. First is the short-term problem we have to deal with is jobs. Long-term, it's the national debt and growing the economy. Just last week on NBC News, Brian Williams said that 1 in 9 American workers will get a full-time job. 8 of 9 unemployed American workers will never have a full-time job again. He said that 36% of working American families have less than $1,000 in savings. This is terrible. So what we have to do is grow the economy. We have to grow it through, as I said earlier, eliminating corporate taxes. We can work on reducing the national debt, but the federal government doesn't want to do that. It wants to keep spending, spending, spending to buy votes. We have to grow the economy, and we can do that very quickly by eliminating corporate debt, by corporate taxes.
Thank you. And the third question is from Chip Blake.
Thank you. This race is a Republican primary in one of the most predominantly Republican performing districts in the country. There are very few differences between you all on major policy issues. All of you are pro-life. All of you oppose Obamacare. All of you advocate for tax reform and for smaller government. What single item in your background or in your resume do you think best separates you from the others on stage?
Barry Loudermill.
What separates me from the other folks that are up here on stage, in fact, they're all very good people, and I've got relationships with all of them. Mr. Barr and I go back 10, 15 years. Representative Lindsay and I served together in the State House, and Ms. Pridemore, when I ran for the Senate, came up and went door to door for our campaign. So we all go back and we share a lot of the same ideology. But consistency, I think, is what separates me from the rest of the crowd. And showing the courage to stand up for those basic principles which founded our nation, which are those of faith, family, and freedom. And because of that is why I've been endorsed by most every respected conservative organization in America, because of that consistency. The consistency of standing up for what is right, the vision of our founding fathers, and the courage to stand for what is right even when it's not easy to stand.
Larry Rosinski.
I'm not a career politician. I'm the only one up here that has stated that I will not accept congressional retirement. I am for term limits. And my career has been serving the United States of America, and I want to serve you again. I believe that character has fingerprints. It tells you where you've been. I don't have any corporate sponsorship or any special interest that I owe anything to. But if you take a look at those in the race, you can find the tentacles that go out and control you, the public, in very inanimate ways. Ladies and gentlemen, I intend to serve as a statesman. That's what separates me from the field up here, and my integrity and my honor. Tested, trusted leadership. Is it not time that we had that?
Tricia Pridemore.
Thank you for the question, Chip. I believe that we're fortunate to live in one of the most amazing places, not only in the country, but also in the world. I've traveled all over the world and all over this great nation of ours, and we're just very, very fortunate to live here. I believe that I'm different than the folks up here because I believe that not all good ideas come from under a dome. I believe that the ideas on how to lead and move our country forward come from boardrooms and cubicles and kitchen tables. I believe that the folks in the 11th District have a real vision of how they want to see this district being led in a positive way, looking at ways to be able to not only secure the American dream for their children and grandchildren, but also making sure that they're able to grow their businesses along the way.
Bob Barr.
The enemy is not here this evening. The enemy is not here anytime. The enemy is in Washington. It's the Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama, Harry Reid, known as the Undertaker, the man who never smiles, and it's faceless bureaucrats all across this country who wield the heavy hand of government power to stifle creativity and entrepreneurship and personal freedom. The key to winning this race is to send somebody to Washington who knows how to do battle with those forces of evil, who has done so, and who has beaten them. I alone have that experience in the arena in Washington to fight and beat the forces of liberalism in Washington, in the United States Congress. If elected to serve in the 11th District, I will go back up with 8 years of seniority on key committees, the Judiciary Committee and the Financial Services Committee. That is what we need in Washington, and that is what separates Bob Barr from the other candidates.
Alan Levine.
I think that I'm a very different candidate. First of all, I have 200 position papers on my website. I've written 200 articles about exactly what I would like to do to solve problems. I'm in the IT business, and my customers say, come in, look at the problem, find out what it is, and then solve it, and then get out. They don't want me to come in and feel their pain, commiserate about what's wrong. So I look at this as a problem-solving business, and I plan to fix it. I'm also an English American, and as such, there hasn't been, as far as we can tell, an English American member of the House of Representatives since the Founding Fathers. As such, I'm known to the British government and the European Parliament. They want to do business. They will not get involved in this election, but the eyes of the world are on this race. I get hits from everywhere, all over the world, seeing what I'm doing. So please visit the website and you can read my positions. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, Chip. What separates me from my opponents is that I'm a Georgia conservative who can get the job done. The best way to tell where someone is headed is to see where they've been, particularly in the last decade. I've been someone who's built the Republican Party here in Georgia. I've been part of the House leadership that has advanced strong conservative agenda here in Georgia. If you look at the tough legislation that we've had to pass here in Georgia, you see my fingerprints on it. You look at it when it comes to property taxes, school choice, illegal immigration, dealing with redistricting, dealing with Obamacare, dealing with fighting for a balanced budget amendment, keeping Georgia's budget balanced in tough economic times. I've been the person in the room. I'm not a rock thrower. I don't step in front of a camera at every possibility. Instead, what I do is I go in, I build a consensus, and I move the Republican conservative agenda forward. That's what we need to have in Washington right now. On the left, we've got folks who want to send us into a dangerous direction. On the right, we've got far too many people who simply talk about problems instead of doing something about it.
And the fourth question will be from J.D. Van Brink.
What changes do you think are necessary for Social Security and Medicare? And do you support transitioning to personal accounts for retirement and health care?
Larry Rosinski.
Well, very interesting question. Social Security and Medicare. It's not an entitlement. That's what our politicians tell us. It's a trust fund. And I think it should remain solvent. You can take $630 million out of the Social Security, Medicare, and put it into a website for Obamacare. I think that's wrong. When Social Security is used for those who are not U.S. citizens, I think that's wrong. And I think that started in 1995, when in fact we had America at the brink of looking at the trust funds and sharing with others who have not put into it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think we need to keep Social Security solvent. I believe that private accounts is an option, but that option belongs to the people. What have the representatives come back and said with the people? They haven't asked them. I believe we need to ask the people. But keep Social Security and Medicare for someone who stayed for 4.5 years with his mother and retired. I know what Medicare is and what it can do and what it can't do. And ladies and gentlemen, we need to keep it.
Tricia Pridemore.
44% of the budget is made up of Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. I think that you look first at the administration and organizational layers of Social Security and Medicare. If you operate an organization at a 35 to 42% cost overhead or overhead cost, you're looking at some real opportunities for cuts. That's cutting people at the federal level, and that's cutting not only individuals and staff, but also the way that they do business. And I think that considering a $17 trillion debt, we need to start there. I am for personal accounts. I'm 42 years old, and I can tell you that my generation doesn't really expect to see Social Security be there for us when we're ready to retire. I think that it's time for us to have a tough national conversation about how we're going to maybe increase the eligibility age, making sure that people that have paid into the system, that they're able to receive the benefits of which they've been promised.
Bob Barr.
In large measure, the debates over the years, such as there have been with regard to Social Security, Medicare, and even Medicaid, are defined largely by the terminology that's used. People talk about these as entitlements. They are not entitlements. Nobody's entitled to somebody else's money to use for themselves or to flow through a bunch of bureaucrats to take from one and give to another. But there are several things that we can and should work toward to reform these programs. First of all, we need to provide more flexibility to the states in those rare instances in recent years in which states have been afforded the flexibility to tailor their Medicaid, Medicare programs to their constituents. It has worked dramatically to lower the cost and to even out those programs. The eventual goal needs to be to move those programs, Medicare and Social Security in particular, toward personal savings accounts, which empowers the people to have at least some degree of control over their money.
Alan Levine.
I have no issue at all with Social Security or Medicare. I have an issue with our government spending so much money that they will bankrupt us in a matter of 4 years. I believe that in probably 4 years we'll have a dollar collapse, and we'll lose the US dollar as a reserve currency. In 1944, the Bretton Woods Conference in Vermont, the British pound lost its reserve currency to the US dollar. The United States economy took off like a rocket. If we lose that, we're in big trouble. We must grow the economy. What's going to happen soon, I think, is that Social Security and Medicare will be means testing, meaning that if you have done very well in your lifetime, you won't get what you normally would expect. While people who didn't do very well, perhaps didn't choose to work very hard, they will get full benefit of Social Security and Medicare. So leave it the way it is.
Ed Lindsay?
Thank you, JD, good question. I'm in a unique position in that I've got a mama who's 87, who's drawing Social Security and basically relies on Medicare for health insurance. And I got 3 teenage boys. Actually, they're not teenagers anymore. I got an older boy who's 22 and twins who are 21. So they're at the twins and the older boy are at the beginning of their employment cycle in life, and I got a mama at the end. And I got to try to figure out a way to make sure that Medicaid care and Social Security are there for my mama during the rest of her life, and also there's something there for my sons when they reach that particular age. The disadvantage of coming a little bit late into this roundtable here is that a lot of the good points have been made. And I do agree with some of the things that have been said. This is not an entitlement, it's a trust. We've got to do things like what Tricia was talking about in terms of taking on the overhead and cost and figuring out a way to bring health insurance, rather health costs, down to a stable level. We've got to start looking and taking seriously the question of whether or not, for my son's generation, whether or not we should raise the period from 65 to 67 or 68 years old. If we do that, I believe that we can maintain the system. Thank you.
Barry Loudermilk?
I was speaking to a group of college students just a few weeks ago and asked everyone in the room, how many of you believe you'll achieve the American dream? Only about 2 of the students raised their hand. And then I asked them, how many of you actually think you'll ever see any of the dollars that you're putting into Social Security? And not a single one of them raised their hand. And the problem is because of a loss of a term that we used to have, which was called the full faith and credit of the United States of America. And we've lost faith in our government because the government has gotten too big. And of course, as we've seen the debt that we've incurred, we've lost the credit of this nation as well. We have to, it isn't whether we want to, we have to reform these programs. It's just like every other Depression-era program that was a temporary solution has become a permanent problem in this nation. We have to reform it. We have to cut costs. And yes, I support migrating these programs to private accounts. But there has to be a transition because the money that was put in by the previous generations belonged to them as well.
The 5th question is from Roseanne Hall.
Considering the problems that Americans are experiencing with the Affordable Health Care Act, what efforts would you engage to either improve or remove it?
Tricia?
House Republicans have voted over 40 times to repeal Obamacare. And until the Republican Party has a Senate and has a majority in the Senate and has the White House, there really is not a possibility to be able to just repeal it on its own. I instead believe that we need to promote solutions. And I think that a really great solution that's out there is Dr. Tom Price's Empowering Patients First Act. What it does is it opens up the relationship back to patients and doctors so that we can have real free market alternatives in healthcare. It also allows us to purchase insurance across state lines, all while ensuring that people that have a pre-existing condition can be covered. So I would encourage folks to look into the Empowering Patients First Act. I think it's a great first step.
Bob Barr?
The Obamacare legislation, when it passed the House, was well over 2,000 pages in length. It was one of those rare pieces of legislation, lengthy legislation, in which there is not one good piece of anything, not one good crossed T or dotted I. Eventually, what we have to do is we have to kill it. We have to drive a stake through its heart, shoot it, burn it, cut it up.